Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, tensions in the north between Israel and Lebanese terror group Hezbollah get heavier. Meanwhile, new coronavirus regulations enter into full force. And finally, a Galilee ice creamery shows how you're supposed to advocate for peace. Cross-border tensions with Israel rising on all sides over the weekend. Israel responding to terror attacks both from Gaza and from Lebanon. Israeli aircraft retaliating Saturday against a string of sporadic but ongoing incendiary and explosive balloon attacks from the Gaza Strip. And in keeping with policy, Israel holding Hamas, as Gaza's ruling authority, responsible for all the violence against Israel. The Air Force reportedly hitting multiple Hamas targets, including an alleged rocket launching site and a Hamas military compound. No injuries have been reported. The Gaza launched balloons for their part, sparking at least 4 brush fires on Friday alone, preceding the IDF strikes. Israeli Prime Minister Bennett therefore vowing previously to respond to explosive balloons in the same way as the IDF would to a rocket. Meantime, to the north, overnight tit-for-tats with a suspected Palestinian terror group in Lebanon, escalating into a barrage of rockets aimed at Israel's Galilee region. Israel last week responding to a pair of rockets with airstrikes, the first IDF airstrikes in Lebanon in 15 years, and Lebanese terror group Hezbollah following up on the apparent escalation. The Iran-backed proxy group firing nearly 24 rockets into Israel on Friday, and then the attack followed by a message.
اخترنا منطقة أرضا مفتوحة في منطقة مزارع شبعة. لنوجه رسالة لنكون مشينا درجة. ممكن بعدين نطلع درجة تانية، درجة ثالثة، أعلى، هلا برجع لها بعد شوي. اخترنا المزارع وذهبنا إلى أراضٍ مفتوحة ولم نضرب المواقع العسكرية وإنما محيط المواقع العسكرية. واخترنا المزارع لأنها منطقة عسكرية لا يوجد فيها مدنيون ولا فلاحون ومزارعون، لأنه في أماكن أخرى أراضي مفتوحة بس يحتمل فيها وجود مزارعين وفلاحين. كل شيء حسبناه بدقة.
Speaking on the anniversary of the end of the 2006 Second Israel-Lebanon War, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah explaining that the rocket attack was designed to tell Israel that we can get serious too, but choose not to, so don't escalate. And whether influenced by Nasrallah or not, Israel seemingly of the same mind. Despite the Iron Dome intercepting most of the barrage, defense officials confirmed that they believe Hezbollah deliberately fired into open and unpopulated areas to rein in a rogue Palestinian faction. And Hezbollah likely has no desire at this time to push things with Israel any further. Then the IDF spokesperson adding that Israel likewise, quote, has no interest in intensifying the conflict or starting a war, but will protect Israeli sovereignty as necessary. Now, speaking of Lebanon, while terror group Hezbollah reportedly trying to show control through their latest missile barrage, the group may not actually have as much support as it used to. A video uploaded to social media showing residents of a Druze village where Hezbollah allegedly fired from over the weekend, and the residents rebuking Hezbollah for ostensibly using them as human shields. And meanwhile, Hezbollah not the only regional terror group facing growing public dissent. A brave man in Gaza calling for a divorce from Hamas following a deadly explosion in Gaza City where Hamas was storing its weapons.
بكف مش قادرين 15 سنة كنا نشتغل في هالبلاد صرنا حرامية ونصابين وخونة وأكبر تجار حرامية احنا صرنا في البلد احنا عن نفسنا نتكلم لأنه غش معانا نعيش فيش معانا نطلع أولاد بدنا نسرق ونقطع عشان نطلع أولاد.
So what does this mean for the terror groups that control those areas? Are they building on a rotten foundation? Joining me with the analysis is ILTV News' Asaf Nissan. Asaf, thank you so much for being with us.
Always.
Now, we have seen a lot of protests, especially recently, in places controlled by these terror groups because they're showing force against their enemies as a way to unify and gain strength in the public eye. But locally, their support is seemingly waning. Is that actually the case? Is their base of support actually diminishing, or is that maybe just a couple vocal actors who are being promoted now?
Well, from what we're seeing, in different places, in different groups like that, it's usually a first sign of a breakdown. But it's not necessarily the case because we are talking about two different groups. One, of course, both of them are backed by Iran, but we're talking about Hezbollah, which is actually not only a terror group, but also is a political party in the country. Unlike Hamas, this may be even harder because we are talking about a party which is inside parliament.
So, again, though, I mean, how much is this a sign of maybe an implosion of sorts, especially given the dire circumstances in Lebanon, atop which, Hezbollah is blamed for a lot of the economic problems, their Beirut explosion about a year ago, a year and a week ago. So is it true that these places might be on the verge of collapse? And if so, how might they keep their strength?
So these places, I would say, are, well, maybe Lebanon is more than Hamas, but Lebanon is, because it's facing so many problems, this is just a matter of time those issues will bubble up. Now, Hezbollah itself is being a party of the people, and unfortunately still having a base of voters, maybe from the party itself, maybe from the terror groups, maybe from the southern parts of Lebanon, because they're a Shiite group, they actually represent a certain political and diversified party that exists in Lebanon. So this is not necessarily the end of their support. They are keeping some sorts of strength, but yeah, we are seeing a big wane in their strength due to the fact of the reasons said above. I mean, we see it from the explosion 1 year ago that it's still blamed that's still aimed at Hezbollah for the main people in charge of the explosion. We're seeing the economic dire crisis. We're seeing the COVID crisis. All those are dominoes keep falling one after the other until in the end of the day, maybe Hezbollah will lose its power. Hopefully it will. Again, I can't promise that, but we are seeing quite a wane in the strength.
How should Israel be responding to the shaky ground, the shaky infrastructure atop which Hezbollah and Hamas are built, especially because while Israel is no friend to Hamas nor Hezbollah, the vacuum that would be caused by their absence could be worse, could spell a more dire situation.
Look, if we talk about Lebanon, we cannot go with the same approach we went back in the 80s. In the 80s, we did go in, and we can all remember First Lebanon War, that led to the creation also of Hezbollah and some of those groups because Israel got involved. On the other, we can go with a wait-and-see approach because, again, that vacuum could be a great power source for Iran to take over through Hezbollah and gain Lebanon as a proxy, despite the fact that a lot of Lebanese factions are against that option. Now, with Hamas, it's a different issue because Hamas is holding the entire region in its grasp. Gaza itself is a prisoner of Hamas and the terror group. So seeing a more civil rise in that area will be harder. Israel could do, again, with a wait-and-see approach because Gaza would be more interesting to see how that would pan out because, then again, the PA could resume control, but then again, Hamas is strong enough maybe in the West Bank to change forces there, and then the PA takes back control of Gaza, but Hamas gains the West Bank. So we cannot be sure yet what could happen.
And there are a number of other terror factions, including Palestinian Islamic Jihad,
of course,
and of course the Islamic State in Gaza as well, to a small degree, and a number of others.
And Hamas can't control them all. I mean, they tried in the past, and you see it with the rockets coming after Protective Edge, after any recent attacks, and even after Guardian of the Walls. I mean, we've seen attacks from the Islamic Jihad due to retribution and stuff like that. So again, it's still a wait-and-see approach.
All right, Asaf, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Moving on, Lebanon, not the only Israeli neighbor in crisis. Wildfires in Greece spreading rapidly amidst the worst heat wave in the country in over 30 years. And more than 700 firefighters, including reinforcements from nearby Cyprus, France, and Israel, have since arrived to help.
Από το πρωί που η φωτιά ήταν πάνω στο βουνό, μπορούσαν να στείλουν τα πυροσβεστικά να τη σβήσει, την αφήσανε, κατέβηκε κάτω τώρα. Έχει πιάσει οι Θρακομακεδόνες χαμηλά ανατολικά, παίρνει την Ορφέως.
For 6 consecutive days now, 56 active wildfires sweeping across Greece, and thousands have been forced to evacuate as tens of thousands of acres of forests, homes, businesses, and more go up in smoke. Allied country Israel, meanwhile, no stranger to seasonal fires, sending a delegation of some 16 firefighting experts and a large amount of fire-retardant materials. But despite the enduring efforts and week-long temperatures soaring over 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit, victims are largely blaming government authorities.
Angry. I feel angry. I lost my home. I lost my home. I lost my place, my birthday place. Nothing will be the same the next day. I am very angry. Most people here are very angry. The disaster, you can see it, right? It's huge. Our villages are destroyed. There is nothing left from our homes, our properties, nothing. And we were all alone. 3 days now, we're all alone. Nobody helped, no one. People need help. They lost their homes, they lost their jobs. They need help. The government has huge responsibilities. All the governments.
That said, Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis promising to address the damages as soon as possible.
Να διαβεβαιώσω για ακόμα μια φορά όλους τους πληγέντες ότι η αποκατάστασή τους θα είναι η πρώτη πολιτική μου προτεραιότητα. Όλες οι κάρμενες εκτάσεις θα κρυφθούν αναδασωτές, θα αλλάξουμε τον τρόπο με τον οποίο δρομολογούμε τα έργα προστασίας, τα αντιπλημμυρικά, τα αντιδιαβατικά.
Now, on another note, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees is in trouble again. The organization responding to a recent damning report by independent monitoring group UN Watch, in which the NGO accuses at least 22 UNRWA employees of anti-Semitic biases and incitement to violence. UNRWA, for its part, now opening an internal investigation into the allegations, but only partially. UNRWA will only be probing 10 of the 22 named persons, saying that despite UN Watch's, quote, deep history of unfounded and politically driven assertions, end quote, UNRWA has a zero-tolerance policy for hatred. So what comes next? Well, joining me now with more is CEO of Impact SE, an international educational curriculum monitoring group, Marcus Sheff. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. Now, this is not the first damning report against UNRWA and its educational staff, is it?
Pleasure, Aaron. No, it is absolutely not. We brought out a report at the beginning of this year which focused on UNRWA's own material, which was written by their teachers, which was unfortunately full of hate. This is material which was produced, printed, distributed by UNRWA itself, what they call self-study materials for the COVID pandemic. And they contain lessons which violate UN values, UNESCO standards, and of course, UNRWA's own principles. They incite to violence, they promote the glorification of martyrdom and of terrorism. They erase Israel, which is of course a UN member, off maps. And they reproduce dangerous libels and conspiracy theories using terms like defending the motherland with blood and passages that glorify as role models terrorists such as Dalal Mughrabi. And so, no, this is absolutely not the first time. But I think what brings these two reports together, the Impact SE report and this new report by UN Watch, is that these are materials produced by UNRWA's own teachers, UNRWA's own staff. You know, UNRWA is the biggest UN organization, a 30,000 person organization, and a good chunk of those people are teachers. And these teachers are supposed to go through a great deal of vetting and education in, frankly, how not to be anti-Semitic, how not to be hateful, how not to bring intolerant ideas to the classroom. And so this is the second time this year that UNRWA's teachers have been shown to, despite all of this, unfortunately, promote hateful ideas.
Well, so, okay, UNRWA's statement says that they'll be investigating to determine, quote, if any of these 10 persons out of the more than 28,000 personnel violated the agency's policies, end quote. To me, this does two things. It completely absolves these 12 others cited in UN Watch's report without investigation, and it gives the impression that this is an exceptionally rare issue. In your opinion, are the other 12 Are the other 12 individuals arguably innocent and above this investigation? And is this as rare of an issue as UNRWA claims? It sounds like from your first response that maybe that's not the case.
Well, firstly, UNRWA states that there is zero policy in their organization for hate, for the dissemination of hate. And right there, we seem to have a problem because it does seem to be tolerance for people disseminating hateful, anti-Semitic, pro-Hitler material, and to the best of my understanding, not being investigated by UNRWA. But I think, the key problem here is exactly that. It is this idea of being investigated by UNRWA. UNRWA maintains that it only teaches content which aligns with the values of the UN. They also maintain that they have this robust internal review in order, and all kinds of mechanisms in order to ensure adherence to those standards. And yet, time and time again, we find that this is not the case. And so, the real problem here is this idea of oversight and accountability. And frankly, there does not seem to be either of those. The evaluation of UNRWA's operations is conducted by UNRWA. That in and of itself is problematic if time and time again we see that UNRWA is propagating hateful material, or in this case, UNRWA's teachers are propagating hateful material. And, again, this is a UN organization, and this is an organization which is funded to something around $1 billion annually by the international community. So, I do think that the idea of the need for external audit is not a crazy idea when time and time again, they do seem to be propagating this kind of material. What is needed here, frankly, Aaron, is transparency. And there is only going to be oversight and accountability when there is absolute transparency in the materials which UNRWA produces, and in, frankly, the views of teachers who are propagating hateful material. Those teachers should be out of that organization. There should be zero tolerance for them.
All right. Marcus Sheff, thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure.
All right, in other news, while Ben & Jerry's is bowing to BDS in efforts to pressure Israeli policymakers, another ice creamery in Israel is taking the higher road. And the prestigious UN prize-winning Buza seen celebrating over the weekend in its classic bridge-building style.
So we have our 9th birthday here in Tel Aviv, and we're giving ice cream for free.
4 hours of free ice cream, complete with a DJ and balloons. A local shop based in Israel's multicultural Western Galilee region, Buza, which means ice cream in Arabic, celebrating 9 years of business in the community. And co-owners Israeli Jew Adam Ziv and Israeli Arab Ala Switat beaming with gratitude over the public's outpouring of support.
זה ממש ממש מרגש לראות את האנשים שמגיעים ומפרגנים, גם מביאים ציורים של ילדים שציירו לכבוד היום הולדת של בוזה, ואנחנו אומרים להם תודה, ביום הזה אנחנו כל שנה אומרים תודה לאנשים.
But serving up more than just a good cone, Buza long operating with the dream of bringing people together over their high-quality product. Buza even becoming the first Israeli company to win the UN's Flourish Prize for making the world a better place in 2017. And both owners, Ziv and Switat, crediting the Galilee's intertwining cultures for Buza's success.
הפסיפס האנושי שגר פה, והפסיפס האנושי שבאמת האזור והגליליות שנושא את המיוחד פה באזור גם.
Of course, the ice cream also playing its part.
The most special thing about Buza is that we are making the best ice cream in Israel. Local and fresh ice cream made from the local raw material and ingredients, and served fresh every day.
Now, meanwhile, speaking of the public's support, Buza also getting a leg up from the Western Galilee Now organization, a small business consortium of about 80 companies operating under the JNF USA's Go North initiative, and an anonymous JNF USA donor who's apparently been following Buza's progress for years, footing the bill for this year's birthday party, especially given the emotional roller coaster that this past year and a half has been.
We're very thankful to Jewish National Fund USA that wanted to show the power of ice cream, bringing people together. We've gone through a crazy time between Corona and then the riots in the country and also in the Galilee. But ice cream is stronger than anything, and we're celebrating life in the Galilee.
And now it's time for our daily update on the 2020-2021 Summer Olympic Games, where we give you the latest surrounding Israel's Olympic team in Tokyo, Japan. Top of our news, rhythmic gymnast Linoy Ashram winning Israel's second gold at this year's competition, going on to receive personal congratulations from both Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and head of the opposition, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Chana Rifkin with the details.
אנחנו קיבלנו את הבשורה במוצאי השבת וחגגנו פה בבית, ואני יודע שכל העם ממש גאה בך. אני יודע גם איזה דרך עברת, כמה עליות ומורדות. נכון, יש הרבה מורדות גם בדרך, ואת יודעת עכשיו הרבה ילדים בארץ מסתכלים עלייך ורואים בך באמת וונדר וומן ודוגמה למאמץ ועבודה קשה. ובסוף הצלחה.
שלום, לינוי. מה אני אגיד לך, אני מתרגש בשם כל אזרחי ישראל. אגיד לך משהו, איזה כבוד הבאת למדינת ישראל. ועשית היסטוריה, יחד עם הילד שלידך, עשיתם היסטוריה לספורט הישראלי ולמדינת ישראל.
תודה רבה.
The 2020 Summer Olympic Games are now officially over, and Israel is far from the overall winner, but that doesn't mean that Israeli competitors didn't still make history. Commentators saying this was Israel's most successful run at the Games in the nation's history of participation. Israelis across the spectrum celebrating the members of the country's largest ever Olympic delegation, especially with rhythmic gymnast Linoy Ashram now becoming the first Israeli woman to win an Olympic gold medal, the second gold medal for Israel this year, and the third Israeli gold medal in history. The other two victors, including gymnast Artem Dolgopiat, who took gold a few days ago, and windsurfer Gal Friedman, who won in Athens in 2004. And coincidentally, congratulations also going to a central Israeli city for helping to produce a number of medalists, 3 just this year, including gymnast Dolgopiat and Ashram, and judoka Peter Palchik, who helped win bronze in the mixed team competition.
ברכות מיוחדות גם לעיר ראשון לציון, שהוציאה מתוכה כבר 3 זוכים אולימפיים עד עכשיו. אני לא יודע מה אתם עושים שם בראשון, אבל אתם עושים את זה נכון.
Meanwhile, aside from the mixed judo team bronze, Avishag Semberg famously picking up another bronze for Taekwondo in the women's 49 kilo category. And Semberg becoming the youngest ever Israeli Olympic medalist, the first Israeli to medal in Olympic Taekwondo, and the third Israeli female Olympic medalist, period. And now finally, some more honorable mentions with the end of the Games. Marhu Teferi finishing 13th in the men's Olympic marathon, but setting a new Israeli record for the competition, finishing in 2 hours, 13 minutes, and 2 seconds. And then in the women's marathon, Israeli runner Lona Chemtai Salpeter dropping out in 3rd place on the final stretch of the race due to stomach pain and the extreme heat. In fact, more than a dozen runners failed to finish due to the heat alone, but Salpeter at least coming back to finish the race, regardless of finishing in 66th out of 88 runners. So congratulations all, and we'll see you for the Winter Olympics next year.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Temperatures cooling down a bit this week. Still sunny August weather though. Lows tonight ranging in the 20s. And then tomorrow, highs expecting to range between 29 and 36 degrees Celsius throughout most of the country, though about 41 degrees in the south in Eilat. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Oh man, already inspiring the next generation. I love it. Oh yeah. That is awesome. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.23 shekels to the American dollar and 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.